I'm Lucia Grillo with Italian Cinema Today. We're here with Pierfrancesco Favino, the star of Il Traditore, The Traitor, Marco Bellocchio's latest film, which is Italy's selection for the Academy Awards. PFF, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We'll just get right to it. What compelled you to take on this role?
Well, I really wanted to do it, so the first thing I did was trying to convince Marco to take me. So I was not offered. I really did my best to be in the movie because of him, because of Marco Bellocchio, and because of the character and the meeting of these two big figures like Buscutta and Bellocchio. I was very, very curious to see how he would have handled that kind of man and mafia movie, which is something he's never done. So I knew it would have been a great opportunity for me as an actor, and I was very, very curious to see what was going on and how he would have handled the story and the character.
He did it in a very unique way. Watching the film, I was thinking, how would people that are not familiar with that story, would they realize the impact of Buscetta and this entire trial and the mafia, right? Because it doesn't start with the violence.
Yeah.
So, for those of us who do know the story, we can follow, but then it's absolutely clear what the impact was to the people.
Well, in the end, of course, there are different levels. One is the historical level, and then there is the personal level. And I think that this is the thing people can rely on or empathize with. In the end, it's a story of a man who wants to die in his bed and wants to survive, which is archetypical. It's a tragic journey of a man, and that is something that we're used to watch. Then, of course, there are all of the ingredients of the mafia movie, but I really like the way Marco portrayed it, because those people are not glamorous as we're used to see. There's nothing cool about them. Gunshots are real gunshots. There's nothing that is action movie driven. It's more a very unique way of looking at the inner life of this man, and I think this is something that everybody in the world can watch and understand.
Yeah. It's kind of like here, like we have mainly African American youth, right? When they get to the age 30, it's a celebration because there's so much violence in inner cities still that if they reach age 30, it's the same exact thing.
Well, yeah, I wasn't born in Sicily in the 20s, so I can't really know what it was and why he decided to embrace mafia, because he doesn't come from a mafia family, so he wanted to belong to mafia. But violence is everywhere. I don't know what you think about it. Violence is everywhere. We're surrounded by violence and aggressiveness, and so it is something that we can recognize. I mean, we all want to be part of something, but at the same time, we all want to be one. And this is another aspect of the story. He wants to be recognized for what he is and not for what he belongs to. Then he doesn't accept things that are changing around him, and is loyal to what he believed in, and things are changing. And there's a subtle anguish he always feels. And that, I think, makes of him a compelling character when you watch the movie.
It's interesting too, because these men, they're not necessarily sociopaths, right? They love, right? And he is portrayed as someone that didn't really care about his children. But there's that moment, that scene after his children are killed, his adult male children, and he's lamenting. And for a moment, I was thinking, I wanted to feel for him, but I couldn't, and I was expecting something lofty to come from him. Can you talk a little bit about that scene?
Well, there are, as I was telling you, different aspects. One is the fact that you belong to mafia. The other is that you have children, and I'm a father too. So, I mean, when I imagine for a second that might happen to me, that I suffer with that. I mean, it's something I can empathize with or sympathize with. But then at the same time, is guilty. Well, he will always be guilty. So, as you were saying, you embrace his feelings, but you don't really get to be with them till the end, which is what we wanted to do. Never forget who he was. But in my research, I've understood that he was a family man. You know, when you talk about abandoning children, think about all the people that go abroad to work and leave their children back, and then they see them after 4 or 5 years. Especially if you belong to that kind of mafia, it wouldn't have been possible in his mind that his best friend would have betrayed him. So that was a kind of revolution in his mind, because mafia promised the people belonging to their criminal organization that nothing would have harmed their children or their families. So that was like the last evidence of the fact that things were changed. But until the end, he never thought this guy might have killed with his hands my children. That was completely out of his mind. When that happened, made him crazy. And I've listened to recordings of him crying for this. I mean, he did it truly, so we didn't really invent that moment. He was a very sentimental man, believe it or not.
I believe it. I've known people that were apparently, you know, and they're like we said.
You're Italian, your origins are Italian, you know how important family is for us, you know what's the investment we make in that kind of idea of tribal group, and for us this is something that's very touching. But then anybody who has children, even coming from other cultures, will understand what it means for a father to lose his children, especially if he's guilty of having abandoned them or left them behind.
Did you feel a responsibility towards the legacy of Buscetta?
I felt a responsibility for our history. I felt a responsibility for the legacy of Falcone more than for the legacy of Buscetta, I have to be honest. I wanted to speak to the family. It wasn't possible, and of course, whenever you portray somebody that's really existed, the first audience you're addressing to are the people who might have been keen or part of his family. But then in the end, this man became also a public figure. So when you also deal with a public figure, you are free to imagine or make hypotheses about what his life might have been. I don't think there's anything disrespectful that we did in terms of talking about his life and his family. And it's confirmed by a documentary that you can find on Netflix now, where his children and his wife decided to appear and talk about him. So if you look at the documentary, if you compare it with the movie, there is nothing that it's different in the story of this man. And even the idea of his life, it's not far at all from what they wanted, what they're telling in the documentary. So we managed to be loyal to his legacy, I think.
And you create a very sensitive, human portrayal of him. This is also interesting because you portray him in different periods of his life, and you kind of, burst in with this kind of like, let's say, Marcello Mastroianni figure, and then it ends out with this kind of, let's say, defeated Escobar. Yeah. How, and the makeup too, and aging you was very subtle, very beautifully done. What was the approach in aging this guy? Well,
first of all, I worked a lot on the weight. Like, his body was telling me something. He wanted to look elegant, but there was something about his body that would always tell you the contrary. His hands, for example, he had like broken fingers because of the tortures. So the way he uses his hands, it's very particular. And you can watch them because it's the only thing that they could actually take on camera when he was around. So you could see his nails were done. You could see that he had a big vanity. But at the same time, his body, his weight, his belly, told me a story about his origins and even what he was ashamed of, what he wanted to hide. Then, and he's always been a very strong man, and he died of cancer in 2000. So, and that cancer hit his muscles. So, I started to lose weight for the end of the movie. We couldn't really watch it chronologically, so I had to work on this gaining and taking weight for during the movie. With this is something I like to work on, and I'm helped by people I work with. But the idea of the weight is not only given by his actual weight or the pounds he weighed, but it's also given by his inner strength. So, for example, all of the plastic surgeries helped a lot. As you were saying, the makeup was very important. We decided to have an arc of a very subtle changes, but then that gave us the idea of age. You know, most of the time when you do plastic surgery, instead of looking younger, you'll look older because of the fact that there is something that's not natural. And also, in the scene you were talking about before, you know, when you see somebody who's done so many plastic surgeries crying, you never really get to believe him profoundly, because there is something that's telling you that something's fake in it, and that was just a visual thing that's not really playable or writable, but it's something that is just visual and gives you a reaction as a viewer. So all of these aspects put together, I think, helped me out in building this art. But it's something that I've been really taking care of throughout all of the movie.
Yeah, it's apparent. It's apparent. You've done really a lot of work and brought us a truly human representation. What do you want people to take away from this movie?
Well, there are several things, I guess. First thing, I would like people to enjoy the movie. You know, when you do movies for the people that are watching it, so, you know, spend 2 hours of their lives for something worth it, which is not something you give for granted. I don't, at least. Second, it's a page of our history that people might not know, but it's very important for us. You know, we've done several mafia movies, and what's dangerous is to think that it's only a movie genre. Well, for us, it's not. It's something that has a big importance in our history, and also, you know, the idea of corruption of our country, or the fact that mafia is so popular. It's something I'm not really proud of as an Italian. So, in this case, we're telling the story of a guy who's helped our heroes, and I'm talking about Falcone, the prosecutor, to give us the possibility of seeking the truth for our country, which is so important. In the end, it's the story of a man who wants to survive and wants to save himself. And this is something that no matter where you come from, you can enjoy watching. There's another aspect of it. We might think that mafia is over, and I don't think it is. In the movie, we're talking about heroin, we're talking about guns, we're talking about violence. Heroin is coming back very, very dangerously in these days. The use of weapons is unfortunately very common and put to a consumer level, which is very, very dangerous. So any movie that can talk about how dangerous it is to step into that kind of world, I think it might be helpful to think about it and just ask ourselves answers about that. Questions, I'm sorry. Ask ourselves questions about it.
And ask ourselves what the answers are, too.
Yeah, exactly. Finally, yes.
And you have a couple of movies coming up.
Well, yeah, there's a movie I made last year that's going to come out in Italy in January. That's Hammamet. It's about Bettino Craxi, who's been an Italian politician in the 80s. And then a movie I made with Gabriele Muccino. That's the fourth movie we made together, and that's going to come in February. And now I'm shooting a movie I'm co-producing, and that's the third movie of a young director. His name is Claudio Noce, and I'm playing in it as well.
And that's in Calabria?
That's in Calabria. You're a region of Oregon, yes. And as soon as I get back, I'm going there to continue shooting.
Are you going to be speaking il dialetto calabrese?
A little bit, yes.
I'm looking so forward to that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Thanks for watching Italian Cinema Today.